Hello, runners. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across this wonderful world. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Coach Ben for the Coaches Chat with our wonderful partners at Hospital for Special Surgery. Joined today by Brent Smith, physical therapist. Brent, how you feeling today?
Feeling great. Thanks for having me here.
Feeling great. It's nice today outside. It's not like 1,000 degrees or
It
too
could
humid.
definitely be worse. Yeah, it's not too bad.
The wind's up. It's nicer.
Wind's up, yeah.
I know we had a couple of races this weekend out there in Central Park. We had the front runners Pride Run. Love that race. The popsicle at the end are always a good one. Another great one with our partners at Achilles, the Hope and Possibilities 4-miler. Then you said you weren't out there for either one of them, but you've done them in the past.
I had to miss it. Yeah, I love the Pride Run. I love those popsicles. I was sad this year.
It's with the popsicles. Is there anything better?
It's the best.
It's nothing
the
better.
best.
I think every race, I don't want to put any extra pressure on the events team or any race out there, but popsicles at the end of a race.
I mean, and it's always so hot and so humid for that race. There is nothing like that popsicle.
I mean, bagels are great, pretzels are great, whatever you need for recovery, but there's something about a popsicle on a summer day. I don't care what age you are, you instantly become like 9 years old.
Agreed, 100%.
They're always good. Runners, we always know you have questions, you have shout-outs. We want to know where you are across anywhere, tri-state, U.S., international. We always have a joke. Who's going to be our furthest away listener out there? We've had Denmark, we've had Australia. People tune in from Tokyo sometimes. Drop in where you're listening from. You want to know where you are out there. Definitely if you're in the local tri-state area, let us know where you are local here so we can give you a shout-out. Always love our listeners that come every week, week in, week out, month in, month out to give us some support out there. But we have a lot of things to talk about. We have runners that we are less than 19 weeks away from the TCS New York City Marathon, all the fall marathons. I don't want to spoil it, but you did say you're training for a fall marathon yourself.
Yeah, I just started training for Chicago, so I'm, 15 weeks out.
Questions on your training, maybe where you are in your nutrition, maybe where you are in your recovery, maybe you are hopefully no injuries. Injuries they happen, but it's important that when you have those moments, knowing to give yourself the allowance, the right to sit back and take back. And that's really going to dive into some of our first things is that rest day. Some people don't celebrate rest. We were actually talking before we came on. Celebrate rest day. How important is it?
I mean, to me, it's more important than the actual running itself, right? Because if you don't get that rest, your body is not healing itself, right? And so these injuries we're talking about, most of them are overuse. You're fine if you just rest for a bit, right? None of them are usually so traumatic that you have to stop training. So you have to honor the rest.
Yeah, we're actually joking. Sometimes you do the 15-week rest and the 1-week training period and ready for the marathon. You'd never be more rested for a marathon in your life with 15 weeks off before. Probably not the best training plan, but no, it is. Some days you wake up and you're just tired. You know, it's hard. I mean, this is not our job, you know, and I remind
at whatever pace, if I get out there and my body says, yeah, you're not doing that today, it's more important for me to just modify and adjust, listen to that internal system, right? That internal signal that's telling me what I should do today.
Yeah, and your body's a great speaker, but do we always listen to it? We always do listen to it. I was always funny. People have our Garmin's or you have okay, I'm going to ask you this question. You probably follow it on a lot of the data. You probably follow pretty closely. When it tells you to recover and rest, are you still following it?
Good question. Good question. I mean, if I've pushed myself hard enough, usually the watch doesn't have to tell me. I know, right? Because if I wake up that next day and those legs just feel like lead, I'm not saying, oh, yeah, let's go for another run. I give myself that day. Yeah.
It's funny, guys. I was actually joking with some runners with one of our groups last week, and all of them agreed, oh, yeah, if it's telling me to do a certain time, a certain thing, I follow it. And I said, what about the rest indicators? And they're all like, they all kind of laugh because it's true. But it's so important again. So let's talk about signs that you may need a rest day, an extra rest day, more recovery. You're tired or you're not sleeping. How much sleep should any person but a runner look to be getting every night?
Well, we need our base minimum of 7 to 8, right? Okay. That's just without running, without physical activity. So if you're not at least getting that, you're not just healing from your normal day. So as you start to push more and more after those long run days where you're putting in more miles, I know sometimes it's hard to sleep. I'm one that has a hard time sleeping after long runs. You know, you, A, get the sleep, but B, if nothing else, at least just lay still.
Right.
Take those naps if need be. You know?
Naps.
That's when your body is healing itself, is when you're asleep, right? So you need that time.
And people don't realize that you're actually making physical gains in your rest, in your recovery, in your sleep when the body is actually healing itself. 7 to 8 hours. Sounds like a lot. I'm probably closer to the 6 to 7. I find myself, I do go to bed early, but I do wake up early and my body clock is very much natural. If we can't get the 6 or 8 hours, close to 7 to 8 optimum. I mean, obviously more is great if you can do it.
Sure, and that's generalized. There's some people that we know that probably sleep 4 or 5 hours a night. That's their base level, and they go for it. I feel it. If I sleep 4 hours and then try to run the next day, it's not going to happen, right? So we just need to know what we need for our body to be at its efficient state.
Yeah, again, everyone's different out there.
Yeah.
So depending on what you're going on, but again, listen to your body, what's going on. It will tell you the legs feel heavy. There's a reason why your legs feel like lead at certain points. And if I was talking to Brent earlier, everyone has their training plan and they're saying, tomorrow I've got to do a tempo, I've got to do my long run, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. And you don't factor in that, hey, maybe it's okay if I don't have to do that. So, everyone says the training plan is like the roadmap. It's not like this immovable object. You can move things around, right? I mean, you're in your training right now. You're just kind of sorry for your own race. You're 15 weeks out.
Yeah, and for me, luckily, I've done some races before, so I know. Okay, if I can't do it today, my work schedule doesn't allow it, whatever, just push it to the next day. It's totally fine, right? And so for anybody that's their first time training for a marathon, do not forget the importance of not doing anything the day after a long run. So just knowing how to set it up appropriately, what workouts are going to be more fatiguing so that you give yourself that rest day the next day.
Yeah, and then another good indicator of recovery, rest you may need is dehydration.
Yeah,
that's always a big one, especially, obviously in the Northeast, we're just starting summer. If you're in Texas, Louisiana, Florida, you're already laughing at us going, you call that summer, come run in Miami, come run in New Orleans.
Yeah.
I know I got some people out there in the Southeast, drop the information, they're laughing at us up here in the Northeast because we're all complaining about summer just starting. But let's talk about dehydration and then hydration,
Sure.
and then how that factors into recovery.
Yeah, no, I grew up in Texas, so I get that well. That heat and that humidity is rough. Yeah, no, right. Summer training, marathon training is so tough this time of year because we're in the summer, right? And dehydration is going to be a massive thing. So you have to stay hydrated, but as you just gave a glimpse to, it's not just the water intake. It's those electrolytes, because you could chug water until the cows come home, but that's going to make things worse because we're all going to have our electrolytes off balance for how much we're sweating for this training. So, that idea of right when you wake up before a run, just go ahead and chug that water with whatever electrolytes you use. Yeah. The importance of hydrating fruits, vegetables. I'm one that after every long run, especially when it was the worst last year, after every run, I made my own juice and just chug that. Yeah, that's how I survived last summer.
You learned
and frozen grapes.
Oh, frozen watermelon's a good one too.
Yeah. Pre and post run, it's great.
Yeah, I remember my father-in-law loved the man to death. He actually froze watermelon years ago when I was living in California. I ate some of that, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is it's like nirvana.
Yeah, when it's like 95, 100 degrees outside, and you push those miles, it's the best thing to come home to.
Again, and it's the small things when you're done, because you're out there, whatever your long run may be right now, maybe an hour, which, for a lot of us, maybe our longest run ever. For some people, you may just getting back in the swing of things. You're going to be upping that volume a bit more and finding those little things that help out and having, frozen grapes, frozen watermelon, whatever you need in the freezer afterward. Because, what are ways that runners can tell if they're new to running that maybe they're not hydrated enough, or what's your signs they should look for to keep out there?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, let's start with when they're urinating. If it's anything darker than like a light yellow, you need some fluids in you. I would say when you're running, a big telltale sign, at least for myself, is I get into that fog. Okay. It's halfway dizziness, halfway just kind of a weight and a fogginess, and that's usually my signal for, I need some electrolytes in my system, like stat. Those are my two big ways. What do you feel?
Yeah, again, usually I drink to thirst all the time. Yeah. So if I'm out there running, because again, it's the best indicator of where I'm at, but I try to stay on top of it because like anything else, if you get behind, especially when you're out, there's no getting back in front of it. It's barely hard to even stay where you are. So always kind of make sure you're taking on the fluids earlier than you think you may need them, because you will, because again, the minute you think you do and you've already passed the threshold, then it's going to be too late out there. And also, sometimes you're running and you just it's not feeling good, right? Yeah. You're out there doing a run. It's like, I'm supposed to do a tempo run today. And you get 5 minutes into a tempo run, a mile in tempo run, it all feels bad. Talk about when you're feeling, I won't say weak, but when things just aren't clicking. Yeah. Is that a good indicator? Maybe you need an extra day off or just to mail it in?
Yeah, it really depends on how you're feeling. Like if you feel bad enough, like you said, take a day off, right? You don't want to push to the point that you injure yourself. But the first thing to think is, okay, is this workout not what I should be doing today? Maybe it's just a nice, easy shakeout run. That's fine.
Right.
Your body's still working. You're still getting some of the time or the miles, depending on how you train in. That's fine, right? It's most important you start to become in tune with your body and realize, okay, what is it telling me that I need right now?
Yeah, I don't want to spoil anything, runners, but Coach Steve and I were working on some fun videos that are coming out pretty soon, and we actually were messing around with how to lay out a training plan for a week or whatever. And people see I have to do a hill workout, I have to do a tempo run. A fartlek run is something that can really be in those moments where maybe an easy run, you need something different than what you have, and a fartlek run can be whatever. The idea is speed play, and so one of the fun ones that we had, Coach Melanie, I don't know if she's out there, she actually what's called the color run, where she'll be like, every time you see the color blue, you pick it up for whatever time. But that's good. Another good indicator, maybe just switch up a little bit, right?
Well, and it helps with the running. There's so many people I know that hate hill runs. I love a good incline because it engages different muscles. So just changing it up anyway, whether it be the speed, the incline, it just lets your body recover in a different way because you're just engaging differently. So yeah, I like the color run idea. That's great.
It was a great workout. People have a lot of fun with it because you run. It could be a car, it could be a building, it could be a sign, whatever the case is. Again, look at ways to invigorate because sometimes just changing the mental state, extra rest, always. Big proponent. Celebrate your recovery. Celebrate your rest. Take an extra day. I mean, it's better to go into your race a little bit undertrained than trying to push through and be overtrained. Because again, overtraining, I'm sure as you know, never a good place to be.
It's not going to work out well for you. And I'm sure you and I both know people who have unfortunately, had injuries, lost out on some training. They took even those weeks off, and they were still able to complete the marathon. Where if they had tried to push through those weeks, there's no way they would have finished.
Yeah, I mean, and right now I'm working with our Team for Kids runners, and we're kind of building our base. So we have a lot of runners that are for first timers out there, and you want to make sure that your body is prepared to do what you need for. You may feel a little bit of, okay, I'm feeling good now. I want you to feel good in September. Because as you know, when you get towards the end of that training cycle, when things are harder, the volume's up, recovery, an extra day here or there early can make a big difference, and even later on in your recovery. I think we may have some questions and some shout-outs, so let's kick it up, my friends. What do you got for us?
All right, we have 2 shout-outs. We have Herbert saying, yo, which is another term for hello. And then we have Jeffrey saying on our YouTube page, hello, Ben. We spoke at the pre-festival event for the RBC Brooklyn Half 2023, and my run went very well with a finish time of 2:55 starting at the 8 a.m. run.
Look at that, 2:55. That was a fantastic day. Pleasure to meet you, Jeffrey. So glad your race went well.
All right, the first question we have, my left Achilles is always tight, running or not running, even with consistent stretching. Help!
Love these questions. I mean, obviously the first answer is, we don't have our hands on you, so we can't really diagnose anything. So you should probably go see a PT, go see a medical doctor to see if there's, some restriction, some weakness anywhere. General calf stretching, general stretching, hold your stretches 20, 30 seconds. Don't be one of those individuals that cranks on that Achilles too much. There's a lot of runners that kind of miss that calf, right? You really need to get into that calf. So you need to stretch it both with your knee straight as well as with your knee bent and see if one kind of gets in there a little bit better than the other. But really get somebody to get their hands on you to see what's actually going on and where that's coming from.
We look at that lower leg, shin splints, the ankles, the plantar, the Achilles. Should runners be mindful? Because again, we always encourage runners as a coach, don't alter your gait. Obviously, stop running. But in those areas, are they connected in some way? Should runners be watching for something? I mean, it's an overuse sometimes, also as they build volume up a little bit.
Well, and it's also tough because tightness and pain, right, could be 2 different things. So you could have a restriction without pain that you could keep running. Obviously, like you just alluded to, anytime there's any type of discomfort or pain that alters your gait, that is a good signal to stop, because then that injury is just going to progress onto something worse. So when you experience pain, definitely stop. If you're just feeling a restriction, might need to get somebody's hands in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take care of it out there, runners. We want to say care of yourself. You want to get to the start line healthy.
Yeah. All right. Next question we have, is yoga beneficial to runners?
I mean, I think it's great because in terms of flexibility, it can be very beneficial for runners. I think runners don't always think about the flexible nature. Like when you tell runners to bring their knee up, they think, oh, I have to have the muscles to bring. It's a flexibility in the hamstrings and the tendons around to lift the body and then move the arms. It can be, a good yoga workout can be, I won't say as strenuous as a hard run, but there definitely is a release of toxins into the body. You have to be careful about the recovery from that. But I think from a flexibility standpoint, is a huge benefit to runners because they think, if I just run and I'm strong, injury prevention, you're flexible, you do a lot of stretching work there. I mean, I don't know if anything I'm missing there.
I mean, a resounding yes for me for yoga. I think as runners, there's 2 things we're not good about: flexibility and strengthening.
Don't question me like that.
I know.
I feel very
we just want to run. Well, and I was guilty of this in the past as well, just thinking, oh yeah, I'll just do my runs and that's good enough. No, you have to cross-train. You have to do your strength training, and you have to do your flexibility. And like you just said, yoga is so great for that strength training and that flexibility in positions that we don't get into as runners.
Yeah, I mean, go back to the question before. The Achilles, the flexibility, 100%. There's a connection there, right? Because think about, everything in the hamstrings. I mean, from what I've heard, and correct me, tendons typically don't have as much blood flow as a muscle, or less than what we, and so they take longer to heal. Correct?
Yeah, correct. And you think about in terms of the body, everything's connected like a chain, right?
Right.
So you could have a weakness or restriction one place of your body, and then maybe it's going to appear elsewhere because your body's compensating. So that's why I say that idea of let somebody get their hands on you, because it could be coming from somewhere else, right?
That we're not seeing.
Right.
Or, okay.
You stretch or strengthen somewhere else that you need it, and maybe that'll unlock that Achilles.
God, this body's amazing, isn't
It's
it?
crazy. Yeah.
Not mine particularly, but your body is amazing, runners. Any questions for us?
Yes. The next one is how to strengthen pelvic floor while continuing to do your run training.
The pelvic floor, yeah.
That's a tough one for me to answer. I mean, you need to talk to like a pelvic floor specialist about that, which I'm not. I mean, I would never want you to go out there and just like hold a Kegel while you're running.
Okay.
It's more so, it's bigger than the scope of this, but a lot of it is some of the core stuff that we might talk about later. The pelvic floor is part of that core. So when we do any of that core training, our planks, etc., that's technically going to help engage the pelvic floor, which will then carry over to your running.
Yeah, I definitely have the question out there. Yeah, I think we always look at a specialist out there because, again, I mean, everything about being healthy is so key, and I mean, you want to be as strong as we can be. That's always the key. Back to, we're good to go. We're moving forward. So you alluded to it. You talked about the core for our next section. The core is one of those funny things. We always hear about it. We always think about where it is, but sometimes it actually extends further than what we kind of look at. So let's just start with that. Define what the core is in terms of what we think, and maybe where we're not thinking of where the core would be.
Or let's even start with what it isn't. It isn't crunches.
Oh.
That we all think of, right?
I've been doing this wrong the whole time?
Yeah, right. So the way I like to think of the core is like a can of Coke, right? So that cylinder, the middle section is your front, your abdominal muscles, and all the muscles in the back. The top of the can is going to be your diaphragm. The bottom of the can is going to be your pelvic floor.
Wow, okay.
So that's kind of the generalized idea. So as runners, right, our arms and our legs are moving off of that can. So if our core, that can isn't strong, it's hard for us to be efficient, hard for us to get our speed. The things we probably don't think about for the core, the glutes, huge. That's a huge foundation for the core. And if those glutes are weak, there's a good chance your core isn't strong. And then things like the trap, the lats, that could also somewhat be considered the core.
Any part of like the back of us, like the back muscles area?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
On
The back muscles around your spine and rib cage are the back of that can.
The whole cylinder, like you said.
The whole cylinder.
Can of Coke. Asking for a friend, can I use a can of rosé as a reference? Okay.
Absolutely.
I want to make sure. I mean, obviously, don't drink Coke out there. Can of rosé works just fine. Can of seltzer,
works.
whatever cylindrical form.
Right? And that's why when you probably yell at some of your runners to like drop their sternum, the xiphoid process, drop your tailbone. That's to keep that can of Coke from being splayed out, because if we're splayed out, that can of Coke isn't going to be strong. So every time he yells at you to drop that sternum, there's a reason behind it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is wild. We think just like the front part. We just think this small little our six pack, which I don't have, but that's what we think about it. And then there's so many ways to kind of activate that. But how does that, what we just talked about, help us? I mean, you talked about just now about keeping the body more in line. How does it help us when we're running?
Yeah, I mean, there's this idea of proximal stability for distal mobility, right? So if we're not stable in that core, it's going to be harder for our arms and legs to keep us going where we're running. So the stronger and more efficient our core is, the easier and faster it's going to be for us to run.
Yeah, I mean, I think we look at like a lot of the pro athletes, we always kind of look at what they're doing, and they just look so fit. They make it look so easy, but I'm sure they do a ton of work.
It's their full-time job, right?
Exactly. What a concept. I tried to make it, didn't work out for me. That's why I'm here, folks. But yeah, I mean, it's so much important that, when you think about, as a coach, we usually work from the local and then we work out. And I think you're saying same kind of idea, right? I mean, this is helping everything else that we're doing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. And then obviously we always hear you say crunches are not core. There's so many different exercises out there. Standing, there's some people say, planks are always good. You can do things on your back, or even in a more upright position. If you had like 3, 4, 5 workouts, what are the benefits and how can we work that into our overall training plan?
Yeah, I mean, you already said it. Planks is one of the easiest because we can drop and hold a plank at any time. Even those side planks, those mountain climbers that you can do, dead bugs or the heel taps. But even when you start doing things like squats are gonna strengthen your core when you're doing them appropriately, right?
An appropriate squat, right?
An appropriate squat being the key word, exactly.
And then I also like people also do like they do like more of a squat and they go side to side. They bend side to side, working the exterior maybe.
Getting those sides, like those, the side plank is getting those side, the side muscles, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's just again we go back into what it all works together, but it's so important that core kind of feeds into everything else 100%. That we're doing. If we don't take care of ourselves, then nothing's going to work right. Yeah. But always good. I think we have some more questions and shout outs. Back at you, folks. What do we got,
All
Steve?
right, we have 2 shout-outs. One says, I love the frozen fruit idea. Thank you. And then longtime listener, longtime responder, Nick New says,
Oh.
I love slow, easy recovery runs. Took me a while to abandon my running ego. And now I go hard on quality runs, specific workouts, and super easy, slow for recovery. Finally listening to the coaches and advice.
And I know, Nick, and thank you, Nick. The running ego, it's a great way to describe it because it is so true. We all have that.
100%.
All right, our first question says, how do you get back to running after ACL surgery? I'm nervous about knee pain.
Wow. Well, welcome
That's
back
a
to running.
loaded question.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you have to be working with a professional, right? So if you've had an ACL surgery, you should be, if you're not already, working with a physical therapist. And part of their goals for you should be reintroducing running to you, right? That's going to be a pretty long process because of that single leg impact.
I mean, ACL surgery. I mean, you hear that. I mean, we hear pro athletes that have that injury. It's typical. It's a long.
That's a long process.
I mean, 6, 9, 12 months typically for runners. I mean,
Yeah,
for,
sounds
for
right to
someone
me.
who's in,
Yeah.
for someone who does it as a job, you think a pro athlete who's going to, they have so many attributes to get into where like everyday people, we have to find someone to help us get the
Right.
appointments in, take care of ourselves at home.
Right.
I don't have a PT at home unless you're married to one. I mean, it's awesome if you do. Yeah, but I mean, I think it's so important you take care of yourself because I mean,
Right.
a re-injury there's tough.
Right, and the idea with any type of injury, or for anybody who's really starting to run any of these longer distance for the first time, gradual introduction, right? So whatever your long distances were before, it doesn't mean, okay, cool, I'm gonna go out today and do 6 to 10 miles, right? You might be starting with a half a mile, right?
I mean, and you also touched on like compensation. That sometimes
Yeah.
we have a problem on one side. Obviously, when you come off an injury, I mean, is it I don't want to say uncommon, but how? I mean, it's not. I mean, I can't imagine a runner. We're going to try to get ourselves running, but I mean, be pretty mindful of that, right? Because if we don't, there'll be other issues come up.
Yeah, I mean, as human beings, what do? We do whatever we need to do to keep moving, especially as runners. We just want to keep going. So, right, having that mind's eye on our body of, okay, what's going on? What am I feeling? And is this feeling off? So that you're not actively choosing to compensate to just keep going. Yeah, it's important.
Take care of yourself out there. Welcome back.
Yeah.
Hope it all goes well.
Yeah.
All right, next question is, can I run through posterior tibialis tendonitis if the symptoms are mild? A 3 out of 10 pain scale.
Oh, that's a tough one.
Running
I mean, if you have the actual diagnosis, it depends on how long ago the diagnosis was, what's been the trajectory of the discomfort or pain. I mean, I'm not really ever going to tell somebody to run through that. Rest, like we talked about. You know, better to give your body time to heal and get over that than to try to push yourself back onto the streets and make it just as bad, if not worse.
It goes back into what we talked about, our first segment, rest and recovery. It's hard as runners because we're so focused that if we miss one run, 2, 3, that our goal time is out the window. We're not going to achieve what we set out to be. And I know even if you've done a marathon 1 time or 10 times, it's hard to kind of break down that mental side of it's okay. Especially early on in your training, you've got time. Yes, it may feel like it's clicking. It is a little bit of a sound through an hourglass. But stop for a moment and say, okay, if I just take care of myself today, hopefully in 2 or 3 days, it may take a week, but once I get back out there, I'll be healthier, happier, and ready to get back out there.
And for a longer time period, right? If we keep ourselves happy and healthy when we're running, we're going to have a longer career as runners.
Yeah, I was working with somebody recently, and they said you want positive feedback loops in your training.
Yeah.
And it's a great way. If you do a run in it, you get done, and you're like, why am I out here? That's not a good place to be, right?
The popsicle.
Wins every
It
time.
all goes back to the popsicle.
What do you got for us, Steve?
All right, we got 2 more left. If anyone has
Cool.
any questions, put them in the chat. This one says, I used to get posterior shin splints. Then I realized I was landing on my heel. Now I make more of an effort to land on my midfoot, but now my bunions hurt a lot. What do I do? That's me. That's
Also-
my emphasis of what do I do.
What
It's
do I
always
do?
more like, what do I do?
All
No,
great
I like that.
questions today, tough ones. I mean, yeah, so it is great to have different gaits, right? I kind of change between all 3, the heel, the midfoot, and the forefoot, depending on the terrain, how I'm feeling. I guess the first thing I would say is, saying that they switch to the midfoot is same thing with gentle introduction, right? If you're doing 6 miles, you shouldn't then just all of a sudden change where you're striking and continue to do 6 miles. Gradually introduce it to see if you get that kind of bunion pain or elsewhere. Maybe you need to also try a forefoot very gently and see between the 3 which one affects you the least.
What about I mean, we always talk about coaches' shoes.
Yeah.
And if if you're a heel striker, you need more heel support, motion control, that kind of stuff. Is this a case where the runner may want to look into some different support or different,
Potentially.
Potentially,
Yeah,
the bunion's
yeah.
hurting. Maybe it's just because like some shoes are wider than others. Maybe
Right.
look. I mean, always look at shoes. You never know. Go talk to somebody out there.
Yeah, and
could
that
be an
whole
area.
toolbox area, right? You want to be able to have room for your toes and foot to move around. So, right, like you're saying, it could be that she's just rubbing on it. I mean, if there is an actual bunion and you're going more towards that mid to forefoot, you're putting that impact right there on those metatarsals, right? So maybe the heel strike is the best for you.
Yeah.
But you just need to find ways that you're not getting that posterior calf strut.
Those are the, I always call it, those are the tires. Got to keep those tires healthy.
Yeah,
because that drives
100%.
everything else, the engine. So
Yeah.
what else you got for us, Steve?
All right, we got a shout out coming from Dennis. Says, big shout out to the NYRR coaching lab. My coach has been great. Already helped me PR on a half marathon, about 3 minutes.
Coaching
Great
lab by
job
Run
to
Coach is
Dennis.
fantastic. Get out there and sign up, runners. Awesome.
We have 2 more questions. Anyone else put them in the chat? We have a question. Should I run by heart rate or by pace?
Yeah, again, I mean, as a coach, when you look at heart rate, that's really going into the environmental factors, which can be both how you're feeling and where you're running, and then also gives you some zones to run in when you're going by. Running by pace can be tough, especially depending on where you live right now. I mean, again, you live in Texas, so running by pace can be very challenging. I mean, I grew up in California where you could do more pace running because the weather was more predictable. I'm a big effort-based runner, which tends to fall more in the heart rate because you're looking at what you're on a scale of like 1 to 10. How hard am I doing? Can I talk? Can I not talk? Heart rates are variable. Go back into our rest and recovery. If you know what your resting heart rate is, if it's elevated by, some people say by 10 to 15 beats per minute, it's a good indicator of rest or being illness, correct? I mean, is that kind of a good ballpark thumbnail?
It's a good ballpark, yeah.
Yeah, so again, if you're doing by heart rate, if you know what your resting heart rate is, obviously, hopefully you would because you're hitting up the zones. Your baseline's got to be key in this case.
Yeah.
Because it's going to affect everything else you're doing from top to bottom. So don't wake up one morning, do your resting heart rate. Oh, it's supposed to be 65 and 75. I'm going to go out there and do that tempo run. Because it's probably telling you something that you already know because you're going to go out there and do your run. All of a sudden, your tempo effort is going to be too high. So listen to your heart rates, listen to your pace. Pace is going to be tough. I mean, when you train, which one do you prefer?
So I'm like one of those individuals that my heart rate gets really high really fast.
Yep.
So I run based on feel.
Yep.
I'm one that's always out there talking to myself or singing to make sure if I,
Yep.
if I can say a sentence or I can sing a song, I know I'm not pushing too hard. When I start doing some of my speed training, the intervals, the fartlek, stuff like that, then I go crazy and I probably get to, way too high of a heart rate. We're not going to say how high I go. It's just kind of learning what you understand, what you feel, and what works best for you. But I do think the pitfall is if you go, okay, I have to train on pace.
Right.
As we've been saying, you don't listen to your body. That's when you might hit a pitfall if you're not
Because
listening.
I think, again, runners are very type A. They look at, I have a goal time. If I'm trying to finish a race in 4 hours, a 9:09 pace. So now I know my marathon pace, and now I'm going, okay, long run 9:45 to 10, tempo this, speed that. And they get so locked in that they forget, am I tired? Have I eaten? Am I hydrated? Are my teenage kids driving me nuts?
Yeah.
It's okay. This is where I think you listen to what's going on with your body more so. And the weather will impact all of that. So regardless of what you do, it's all a roadmap. Take care of yourself and always give yourself the leeway, the ability, the permission to adjust what you need to.
All right, our last question as of now. If you have a final question, put them in the chat. So remember Nick New's comment earlier about learning to adjust to easy running.
Yeah.
Now this is his question, saying, during spring training, I developed twinging hamstring, post too many intervals and fast runs. It's not a sharp pain, more of a throb and not a barrier yet. Do I need to take a full break or can I run smart? And my question, what would running smartly look like if you would do it that way?
Yeah, I mean, well, running smart is kind of what we've just been saying, listening to your body, right? So I wouldn't go out there and start hitting up those intervals and speed again. Go very slow, see how you're feeling. If it's a type of discomfort that goes away after a couple minutes of running, you're probably okay. If it's the type of discomfort that stays or gets worse as you're running, disengage and give yourself that rest.
Yeah, again, if you think about any kind of injury, but think about your overall, the aerobic base. I mean, if you look at your pyramid, you're training like a pyramid. You have this base. Okay, how high do you want your pyramid to go? If you don't give yourself time to really get the aerobic base strong, full, that's going to feed every other engine you have. Add an injury on top of a lack of aerobic capacity. You add in your hill work, your speed work. Now you're risking not having the endurance to go what you want, but then risking injury because your body is not prepared for what you're trying to do. You want your peak to be super tall when you're doing that. So I think in this case, any kind of injury, you've got to come back.
Yeah, you take that rest. Because we talked about compensations earlier, and if he's running through that injury and compensating, there's a good chance you're going to develop an injury elsewhere in your body, right? So I always say rest.
Yeah, I think that's the win. I think that's the rest. That's the key word for the day.
Yeah,
rest,
rest.
recovery, and frozen popsicles.
Popsicles, yeah.
Frozen fruit.
He replied saying it's going away.
Well, and that's good. And so, no, and that's good. So we're going in the right direction, right? So keep up with your icing, keep up with any of the anti-inflammatory work you do, maybe some of the strengthening, right? Make sure that core is strong, those glutes are strong. Start out with some of those very gentle jogs. See how you feel for the next day or two after that, right? Don't run multiple days in a row. See how your body responds, and that's going to kind of tell you, am I okay to return to running, or do I need to cut back still for a little bit?
Yeah, and again, runners, take care of yourselves. You know, it's just get started training. We got you're 15 weeks out
15
from what you
weeks
got
out,
out.
yeah.
We got 19 to the TCS New York City Marathon. We got a lot out there. Any final words for our runners, our listeners out there, Brent?
No, just don't forget that rest. That's the key. Celebrate that rest. It's important.
Celebrate the rest. Runners, thank you so much for joining us. Go grab some frozen fruit, some frozen popsicles, and we will see you at the start line.